But this now, it's a lot better, eh?
It's fantastic. G'day YouTube land, as some of the channels I watch say when they go live. Hey, you in YouTube land. But I prefer to say hey now, and welcome aboard to our afternoon show. We've done a few this month, Carl. How many have we done? About 3 or 4 afternoon shows.
Yep.
2:40 p.m. Is it Tuesday here or Wednesday?
I don't know.
So you don't know either. It's 2:40 p.m.
Oh, Tuesday. It had to be Tuesday, wouldn't it?
Let's have a look. So yeah, okay. So it's isn't that bad? It's we'll start again. It's 2:41 p.m. Tuesday afternoon, New Zealand time, and Carl and I were just having a bit of a chat off air before we went live, solving the world's political issues, but also celebrating the fact that we can go back to work. We're on level 3 next week, so that means that well, I can certainly go back to work. I don't know if you can, because your business is face to face, isn't it? So are you back at work? Limited. Okay. So yeah.
But you can still coordinate the sale of the house. But
okay. Awesome. That's good news. That's good to hear. So yeah, I can't have any face-to-face contact, but I can do shit.
With your doors being locked, you'll just be processing orders via the phone and emails.
Yeah.
A lot of courier work.
Yeah, but also, a lot of, like I can do orders for people, and when I get paid for it, I can leave the item outside, and they can pick it up. They can wave at me through the door. And I can, but you can't have face-to-face contact.
When I work where you work, you've got a lot of idiots that sneeze and cough, come and act silly.
Look, I this is probably the first time that you and I are just doing a live show where we're just going to chat. We've got a bit of an idea of what we want to talk about, and I'll lead into a bit of an introduction, and I'll let you share your thoughts on a couple of things. One of the great things I like about social media internationally, my friend, is that we get a lot of information. That's the positive thing about social media, and we'll talk about this till the cows come home, about how great it is and how much stuff we've learnt over the years in this short time. All this information that we wanted when we were 14 or 15 years old that we just couldn't get. We just could not get. We didn't know. We would guess, and we were so far off the mark with a lot of our guesses that we didn't know, But now we're getting older. We've got the information through internet, and we're getting this information. We're finding out about what year was that guitar, what amps, and look, I want to know that stuff, and so do you, and so do some of the people that watch our shows, because we're nerds, and that's what it's about, Just like there's some guys out there on some YouTube channels talking about fly fishing and how they fly flies, I don't know anything about that. I've got no idea, but I appreciate the fact that guys will spend 3 hours on a YouTube show talking about that.
Yeah.
But the point that I want to make is that I got given access to a photograph from a friend of mine on a couple of Facebook groups that I'm admin on, and there's one guy called Serge. Hey, Sonia. There's one guy called Serge who is close to a couple of guys in Europe through the British blues scene. And anyway, he found the photograph, and within 2 hours, of him putting that on his page, he sent me a copy of it. And I appreciate that. And this is the photo here that we're talking about. I don't know if that's, I'm going to present myself.
It's legible, yep.
Okay, so there's Eric Clapton at a gig in 1966 next to John Mayall playing his famous Beano Les Paul. And we know that's his famous Beano Les Paul because nerds like us know, because it's got the white bobbin pickups, which is on the cover of his, on the back cover of the Beano album. So anyway, so I got, you know, and I don't want to give anybody who's watching the show now or anybody who's going to watch the replays, I'm not in it for the fame. I'm not in it for the notoriety. I'm just in it because I want to hang out with people who like the same shit I like. That's the only reason why I'm doing it. That's the honest to God truth. I don't want to be famous for breaking anything first. I'm not into any headlines. And I'll tell you why, because we never advertise about sharing our channel. We never paste links for our channel on social media so that people can jam up. It's never about us having 2,000 subs. It's just about a couple of people getting together, talking about something that they like. So I got, anyway, back to my story. So I got a nudge on this pic before it went viral through a good friend of mine through social media. And what's really interesting is that on my Facebook page, which is called All Things Eric Clapton, and I'll put a link to that page on this show, and another one called the British Blues Project. Now we've got, again, I hate to say this, you know, but I say this modestly, we've got some interesting and important people who are members of these Facebook groups. Martin Clemens, Joe Green, Arlen Roth, who just joined our group a couple of days ago. So these are guys who have been players in the movement, who are passing on some information to us, who I would love dearly to get onto our show. So cross fingers and hope that we'll get these people. Anyway, so I put these pictures on our Facebook group, and then all these bigger groups got hold of this picture, and they're all sharing it amongst themselves, all patting themselves on the back for saying that they broke this picture. No mention of our pages that, you know, that we're involved in, and no mention of our YouTube channel. It's almost like that these Europeans, these English guys, and I don't include Simon in this criticism because he's with us, but it's almost as if they can't acknowledge a couple of guys on the arse end of the world from New Zealand for being important in the releasing or making known this important photograph. Yeah, and that kind of upsets me. So that's my rant, and that's my introduction to the show. You know, so we're lucky enough to get a 1966 photograph of Eric Clapton playing at a gig with his Beano Les Paul. So yeah.
Interesting. So with that particular shot, was it an outdoor concert? Sunglasses on?
Well, yeah. So it kind of looks like it, doesn't it? It kind of looks like it. Yeah. It's. I got given. Okay, so just hold on. You talk, and I'll get that information because.
So I found out. I watched this really interesting documentary last night. This English guy. It was a great documentary because actually, kind of one of those documentaries that I kind of wanted to actually be a bit longer. Most of it was so long, you get bored, but he was pretty concise over about maybe no more than 30 minutes. They said that the reason he took the covers off the humbuckers is because he thought he'd get a slightly more aggressive sound. Is that right?
Okay, so I've shared that documentary. That's with a guy called Ramon Goose from the Guitar Show. So yeah.
Got white hair or blonde hair?
Yeah, Yeah. Again, I take my role as admin in a couple of the Facebook groups that I'm a member of, responsibly, and there's a lot of information out there from a lot of guys that are doing stuff on YouTube channels, but they're not really interested in sharing their stuff on social media. So I grab their links and I put them on our pages. So Ramon, yeah, that's a very, very good documentary. His channel, it's called The Guitar Show, and again, I'll put a link to his channel.
What I liked about the show,
yeah,
was it was just it was very it was well spoken. He'd go on and on, but there was about 6 to 10 points that he mentioned that I didn't even know. I just assumed that John Mayall had an arrangement with Decca Records.
You got some headphones there, Carl, that you can plug into your PC, because we're losing you a bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's just getting a little bit hard to hear you. And I'm sorry to piss you off by having to mention that during your Hey, it's good information for anyone watching the show. If you're ever going to go live or do any YouTube shows, have some headphones. It's really, really important. Have some headphones to lock into your computer so that you can get good sound.
How's that?
Oh, brilliant. So much better.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so much better. That's just awesome.
I didn't even realize I was quiet.
Yeah,
it's so loud. It's so loud. It's so loud, I got to turn the volume down.
Yeah. Now, always use headphones, mate. It's always a good thing. So anyway, I interrupted you. So you're going to talk about some points that you picked up on. Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. Oh, so John Mayall, I had the album live at Kluke's Cleek, and I just had the understanding that he had a record deal with Decca Records, but I didn't realize that they just signed him as a one album. What's it called?
One album deal.
Yeah, one album deal. Yeah, there's another word I was looking for, but so it turned out to be a bit of a disaster. Kluke's Cleek. It didn't sell many albums. And then Mike Vernon was kind of like a savior. He basically was a blues hound, would basically scour all the nightclubs and blues clubs, which is only about 6 or 8 in England or London at the time. And he said, "You got to sign this young guy, Eric."
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is that, and we don't know the Vernon story. We've mentioned him before, haven't we, a few times on a few of the shows that we've done about how he's important. But, he saw himself as being a key figure, obviously, getting out there every night, going to watch these blues clubs. But so I didn't pick that up. So he saw Clapton playing with the Blues Breakers, and that's when Vernon said that they
with the Yardbirds.
Oh, okay, with the Yardbirds. Okay.
Yeah. See, John, the live at Kluke's Cleek, which is not a bad album, but Roger Dean, unfortunately, just was a background guitar player. It wasn't someone like at the front, that. So his skill level was limited, but. Decca basically put John Mayall on the shelf, and then basically when they signed Eric, Mike Vernon was the negotiator saying, "Re-sign John, please. We've got this new guy featuring Eric Clapton. It'll go great." And basically, I didn't realize that, but that basically saved John's career, because then John released 3, 4, 5, 6 more albums for Decca Records.
Yeah.
So Eric Clapton, in a way, I just thought that Eric Clapton did this great album for John Mayall, and that was it. I didn't realize behind the scenes there was a lot of other stuff going on. And that basically, this young guy basically saved John's career. Mike Vernon basically got a lot more exposure, and they revolutionized the way that you record in a studio. They basically, a little bit like the Hoodoo Man Blues, the Junior Wells and Buddy Guy, they made a decision. Oh, actually, this is what happened. Yeah, I didn't realize this. Their plan was to record John Mayall and Eric live.
Like, that's correct.
Wow, I didn't even know that. And I guess the positioning of the mic was wrong, or the club was wrong, or the gear was wrong. But it just didn't come out that good. So the next best thing was to get that live sound in the studio.
Yeah. That's correct. And when this lockdown is finished, what I'll do is I'll loan this book to you. I picked it up last year. I managed to get hold of a secondhand copy from Amazon, written by Bob Brunning, who's an important person because he was the first bass player in Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. But I'll loan this to you because a lot of the information that Ramon was talking about on his video came from this here too. There's a lot of information in here about how they how they went around that process of recording that album. It's interesting too because you know how they were talking about recording live. They had the background album of 5 Live Yardbirds. You know, that was recorded live with one speaker. Sorry, with one microphone. And you've heard that obviously many times over the years, I'm sure. It's
a little bit, yeah. It sounds like a bunch of kids.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. It's pretty edgy. It's pretty coarse. But what's interesting though, and I think this is something that I'd like to talk to you about because you're the record nut. There is always this appreciation, or seems to be this appreciation of live record sounds in the UK. The British seem to love it.
Maybe it's excitement or edginess. I'm not sure. Well, maybe to do with sports, soccer. Football, live, you know. I mean, maybe they're so cooped up in their places and the weather's cold that something live is exciting. Maybe it's their pub background of going to like Simon Williams said, there's a piano on the corner of every pub. Piano inside a pub on every corner. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So whatever happened to those tapes that'd be amazing tapes to listen to. Were they shelved or lost, or I would love to listen to.
No one knows. That's the interesting. That's the interesting thing here is that you know, again we've got Eric Clapton and John Mayall to thank because when Jimmy Page produced I'm Your Witch Doctor and that other song, Telephone Blues, he learnt what the future of that British rock and roll blues sound was going to be early on. And then he realized very early on too, didn't he, by being a session musician, that he had to have some control over the band or the bands that he was going to be involved in, both financially and managerially. So, you know, we all know we're all Led Zeppelin nuts. We all know that Jimmy Page financed that first album and that second album. We all know that Jimmy Page produced those albums, and we all know that Jimmy Page owns those master tapes. He's got them. You know, they're not hidden. Yeah, they're not hidden in anybody else's vault. He's got them at home, man. G'day, UJ. Thanks for popping in. It's good to see you. I do pop on your channel and catch up with you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, another thing I didn't know is there's 3 parts of Eric Clapton's time and the Blues Breakers. So the first part, he was playing a telly through a Vox.
That's correct.
And then
that's his kit that he had from Yardbirds. Yeah. And
then the middle phase was not being in the Blues Breakers, but going on a hiatus to Greece, where before he went there, he took his Les Paul with him.
Yeah. on the bus, on the Magic Bus Tour.
Oh wow.
the Gads,
Oh, is that right?
or the
And then so the third phase of him is coming back, obviously maturing a little bit, guitar sound, growing into an adult, bigger sideburns,
tail
and
between his legs, getting chased out of Greek pubs.
oh, is that right? And then and then obviously and it was just fascinating, this documentary. I really enjoyed it because I couldn't sleep last night. That Gibson Les Paul and him finally getting the Let's Hideaway Dance Away talking to Jim Marshall, saying, "Hey, I got the Gibson. He's playing a bassman. Hook me up." And so after some trial and error, they came up with he must have did he actually have a bassman in his workshop, Jim Marshall, to model his new amp on?
Well, Jim Marshall was a smart guy and knew what the circuitry was. You see, so that was the key. So okay. somehow they must have had access to a bassman over time. But as we know, buying a Fender in post-war Britain, early 1960s was just wasn't going to happen. That it was thousands and thousands of pounds. But he wanted that bassman sound. So what's really interesting is that he goes and gets this Marshall JTM 45, which could be seen at the time as like some locally made kind of step down from a Fender bassman. You know what I mean? But I can't get the bassman, so I'll just take this locally made thing. Then he takes it and then realizes, oh my gosh, it's probably better than the Fender bassman.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Well, was it four? They started out the 410s and they settled on the 212s.
Yeah. That was interesting too, because I wasn't aware of that. I was not aware of that. I always thought that he had the 212s and then went to the 412s. The quad cabs. Yeah, the 410s. Sorry, because there's some photos of him. While we're talking, I might be able to. So there are some photos of him with sitting next to a quad when he is with the Blues Breakers. So and excuse me, I'm just going to sneeze. Hold on. We all know that the reason why is that he wanted something more portable. That's correct.
Oh yeah. The term was, "G'day mate, Jim. It's Eric here. Can you build me something so I can fit in the trunk of my car, my boot? Sorry, is that right? It's a practicality.
Yeah.
Something with a Voxy sound, but a lot bigger, and something that can fit in my boot."
Well, I suppose we have to give credit where credit's due, because and we all understand this because we're all guitar players. Clapton was hearing something clearly in his head. He had spent months listening to all these Chicago blues records, and he knew that if he had a Les Paul, he was going to get a little bit closer to this tone that he was hearing, and he needed some amps. I don't know who said this quote, but someone said it, and maybe if anyone knows it, they might want to leave comments in the chat. But I think it may have been Vernon himself. I think Vernon said that his sound that he was getting with the Vox amp was a pissy sound.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me, being 30 watts. Well, I mean, you can clearly hear not necessarily the upgrade of the sound, but the sheer weight of the sound transition from the Yardbird sound to the Blues Breakers sound. There was definitely a big change. It'd be fair to say that the Yardbird sound was a fraction bright.
Yeah, so I just want to get back to the point that you made about how we went from 410s to 212s. That's a very interesting point because, this is some information here. And again, it's just reiterating everything that I said before Carl pointed that out. There was, of course, picking up the 2x12 JTM 45 combo that endured blah, 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 blah. So that, it doesn't say, and then it goes on about Ken, here we go, electronics engineer Ken Brand taking Fender's imported Bassman combo as his basis and creating a version from all British components. So, so they obviously did have access to a Bassman. So, but yeah, good point that he was using 410s. So he was probably getting a pretty good sound from those 410s.
Yeah, I did not. I need to watch the documentary again, but I need to figure out why do they go from the 410? Oh, it was a size issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right from the word go, he must have been getting a cranking sound when he was playing with the Blues Breakers, with those 410s.
Oh yeah. Just would have been just probably almost too much, maybe. It was quite interesting. Yeah. So he came back, and he was pretty stubborn in that studio. And Mike Vernon was on his side, and he had all those old fogies saying, this is unheard of, unprecedented. Who's this young guy? What's he doing? Why is it on volume? Why is it on level 10? Why is everything shaking and vibrating and bleeding? And they just said that's what he wants.
Okay, I think what we all need, we all need to do this experiment. Go on Spotify, and there's the Blues Breakers album on Spotify. There's the mono version, and then after that, there's the stereo version. Listen to the stereo version of that album, and you can hear Eric Clapton in your right ear. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal what they've done with that stereo version.
Okay, because I was watching they upgraded the Decca Studios. They put a 2-track. So in 1960, they brought in some new equipment, which is at that particular time pretty cutting edge.
Yeah.
Obviously, everything was tube, which is amazing. I actually owned the stereo version of Blues Breakers, but I think I may have sold it because it was recorded in true stereo or artificial reprocessed stereo.
Well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. But if you're listening through headphones, and I highly recommend that for anybody, for a guitar player, you listen to the mono version and then listen to that stereo version. It's like, oh my gosh.
So they said only the one song that was not recorded live was Stepping Out. Was that overdubbed or something?
Yes.
Okay.
So you got to remember too, like for example, the first song, there's a lead and there's a rhythm going on there, so Clapton's obviously, they've dubbed him playing the rhythm, and then he's playing the lead. And Double Crossing Time, the same thing, they've got a rhythm going on in the background there, and then you've got Clapton cranking it, playing his lead. So but again, it's very interesting the way that they've mixed that, because if you listen to both those versions, the stereo or the mono, you almost get the appreciation that it's fully a live album. You're listening to something that's been recorded live.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, no, it's exciting. That's what they wanted to try and emulate and get, And when he brought that up, I was like, I had never really thought about it. I just thought, Eric's just going there, young guy, lot to prove, turns it up. That's the sound he wants. I didn't realize they were trying to get a live sound. So,
well, that's right. You've got Vernon there, you've got the guys from Decca, and obviously reputation's been important. And again, let's give credit where credit's due. Mike Vernon was hearing these bands when he was having a beer at night. He could hear that crunch. He could hear that blistering leads coming through. He was listening to it. So obviously he wanted to reproduce that on some records, didn't he? Because if he's sitting there getting excited, wow, this is great.
Well, yeah, I had a newfound understanding last night after watching that documentary that all the stars aligned at one time. John had the backing band, and he had the connections. Mike Vernon was the hustler, the aggressive guy with the golden ear, and Eric was the young guy, the protege, the God's given talent that was doing something unheard of. And Mike Vernon, I think, said it. This was a first. This was something that was unprecedented. What he was doing.
Yeah, and I got to give Simon a little bit of credit for this, because a couple of shows ago he mentioned it to us too, that John Mayall was smart enough really to realise that he needed to include Eric Clapton as an individual in his band. John Mayall with Eric Clapton, because Clapton had been developing a solid a solid following. So, and that was going to transfer into what, Carl? Record sales. And back then you could earn some money selling records, couldn't you?
Well, John Mayall would have been happy, because all of a sudden he was Decca told him, hey, thanks very much for that album. Didn't quite work. Good luck with your pub gigs. I'll send you a Christmas card. And all of a sudden, re-signing with Decca with featuring Eric Clapton, it was number 7, and then stayed on the charts. I think was it 19 weeks.
Actually, I think you've raised a good point there, and I'm just making the connection. Thank you for that. So he got yes, and that's something that we haven't discussed. So yes, he got dumped by Decca already, and he didn't want to get dumped the second time. So it was important for him to make sure that he was going to include Eric Clapton, this young gun, to make sure that he was going to be at least successful somehow.
Well, and a great, I see it right there on your headline there. Blues Breakers, John Mayall with Eric Clapton. What a great marketing move that is, It's like Robertson and Sinclair, what Robertson sharpening, average, Robertson and Sinclair.
Yeah. Well, the reason why this album is the banner for our show, it's because it's an important record. It's the record that put everything that, if there wasn't this album, there'd be no Led Zeppelin, there'd be no Fleetwood Mac, there'd be no Eric there'd be the Rolling Stones would have continued doing 2000 Man kind of stuff,
Yeah. Well, it was the birth of for the lack of a better word, a white guitar hero.
Good point. Good point.
And not bringing race in anything, but from an English perspective, it can be done.
Good point.
Blues turning into rock.
Good point.
Yeah, and then Jimi Hendrix took note, and he came over to obviously England, and says first thing he did when he got off the plane, he didn't want a mince pie or a pint. He wanted to jam with Eric Clapton. Right, that was the first thing he wanted to do.
Yeah. Good. That's a good point, and we don't want to take race into it, but being white or black's important when you're talking about blues, because it's about the translation of that music over the pond, as they say, and it's about how the Poms repackaged it and threw it back in the Americans' faces, and the Americans didn't know what the hell it was.
Well, up to that point in the white radio stations in America, you had what they called race records, or
music.
Race music. Yeah. So you had blues guys with black guitar players, and that was that. It was a line drawn in the sand. That was that. Yeah. And the white guitar players were obviously country and western, or surf guitar, or what was the other one? Big at the time, or just yeah, or jazz maybe. Not really jazz, no, but yeah, country western and teeny bop music.
Yep.
Rockabilly stuff.
Yeah.
So Eric basically said, I'm changing that. I want to emulate these Otis Rushes, these Freddie Kings, Buddy Guys, BB Kings, Albert Kings, Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
And it took about a year or two for that word to leak out in America, because they had interviewed that interesting American guy who said, well, Mike Bloomfield was my guy.
Rick Vito.
That's him, yeah. And it took him about a year of listening, going back and forth, thinking this Eric guy's unbelievable. This Eric guy's doing stuff similar to Mike, but he's got his own style and that sound.
I don't think you could get anything more revolutionary or mind-blowing in 1966 if you were lucky enough to have heard Robert Johnson's, this guy here, Robert Johnson. If you were lucky enough to hear Robert Johnson and his version of Rambling, and then you hear Eric Clapton's version of it, the last song on that album, a nervous vocal, as many reporters have reported or writers have said. I don't see it as a nervous vocal myself. I don't hear it as being nervous. I certainly hear it for being a young guy. But that guitar solo, the way that they had worked that out, the way he had arranged that song from the acoustic version to that version, that's phenomenal. That's just wonderful musical training that these young guys had. And there's another little thing too that I want to add while I remember it, because I've wanted to speak to you about this a few times, but I keep forgetting. You got to remember, this guitar that he was using was a 59 or 60 Les Paul. In 1966, the bloody thing was only 5 years old. It wasn't a 60-year-old relic, $100,000 or $200,000 guitar. It was only a 5-year-old guitar, in 1966. So it wasn't, it was still new. It was still fresh off the tree, Carl. It was a freshly caught piece of meat, Yeah.
And in retrospect, 50 years later, apparently after all the Gibsons and stuff he's played, all the Les Pauls, that was the one. There's something special about that particular guitar. What was it called? The name was called the Burst.
Beno Burst. No. He didn't give it a name. But that's what Gibson have called the reissues of it. Their marketing thing. I don't know whether you caught my channel and a video I did a couple of days ago, but one of the reasons why I purposely waited for 2019 to get my Les Paul, I was going to get one a couple of years ago, but I thought I'd wait. I'd save a little bit of money, and I'll wait for 2019 because that'll be 60 years from the 1959 Les Pauls, So in 50 years' time or 60 years' time, my Les Paul traditional is going to be famous, and because Andrew Walton had played it.
So 50-year anniversary.
But yeah, hi Arvin. But that's a point that I just want. I think we have to remember that guitar was only 5 years old when he recorded that album. It was still a new guitar.
And besides taking the humbuckers off, that's right, another thing too. He was a loyal guy and would see this random person who sold banjo strings.
Yeah. So that's again that's illustrated in his biography. So he was using what they call 9-gauge strings very, very early on.
Is that the bottom E was 9, the radius?
Yes. Because most of the guitar strings that a lot of the guys were using, and again Keith Richards talks about it in his biography. Again, it's only something nerdy that guitar players will talk about because guitar strings are important. I know that because Arvin's done the same thing. We watched Rick Beato's video a month or so ago, and he said, change the gauge of your strings. So I went and bought some eights, put some eights on my Les Paul, and cut them off after 10 minutes because it just sounded like crap. I went back to putting 10s on my Les Paul. So, guitar strings do make a difference. But Clapton's on record for saying, that, he was one of the first guys to use thin gauges because he liked that because it meant that he could get a good vibrato,
Yeah,
and if you listen to that album, especially on stereo, you can just hear that vibrato, man. It's just phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because Stevie Vaughan would obviously play 13s and had the tone all the way turned up. But Eric Clapton, to get that thick tone, he would have had probably the tone rolled off and the amp turned all the way up. Is that right?
I would say so. I would say that there is no way that he... Okay, so we can't prove this, but I think you're right. He would have had the amp on 10. He would have been playing his Les Paul around about 7 or 8.
The tone rolled off, and then on the thinner sounding pickup, the one
just a smidge, just not too much, not to the woman tone degree, but certainly would be riding the volume. The volume would have been the key knob on that bridge pickup. He would have been riding that, and again, you got to listen. And we're all guitar players, and you're gonna get sick of me hearing. You're gonna get sick of me. You're gonna get sick of hearing me say this, but you've got to listen to a lot of this stuff with earphones, to pick up the differences, and you can hear the difference in the volume. You can hear him fiddling between the different solos, the different sections. It's phenomenal.
Can you hear his fingers touching the tone knob or the volume?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, not that delicate.
But you can hear the pick touch the strings, though. I think, eh?
Yeah. So for example, when on Double Crossing Time, there's he's playing one part of the solo around the 7th fret, and when he goes down to the 12th fret, he's fiddling around the 12th fret. You can hear the volume change in the guitar because he's kicked it into 10, and then when he goes back down to the 7th fret, he's rolling the volume back a bit again. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. You have to. I think a lot of the times these are pre days of the pedals and the boosters and all that.
Yeah, no pedals.
Yeah, to do your solo, you have to be cranked all the way up, and then so you don't drown out John Mayall, you've got to roll it all off for the vocals.
Yeah, I think what he's doing there is he's doing 3 stages of the volume because he rolls it back. I would say he's rolling it back to about 5 when Mayall's singing. So when Mayall's singing, he's probably playing halfway. Then when he's playing, the start of a solo, he might be cranking it up a couple of notches to about 7. And on a Les Paul, that makes a significant difference. On a Gibson, you've got a Gibson, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The 2 or 3 different changes from 5 to 6 or 7 makes a big difference. And then when you crank that up to 10 again, it's just phenomenal.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, there's these sweet spots too. I mean, and only a person that plays that particular guitar can find it. But it's nice. It's a revelation. But yeah, so I'm blown away. I just, with the Vernons, the guitar switching from the Tele to the Gibson Les Paul, switching from the Vox to the 410 to the 212, just the size of that particular studio. It wasn't a big studio. Everything just seemed to come together.
Yeah, I'm interested in doing a little bit of research on this 410 carry on. Yeah, because I was not aware of that. So I appreciate you highlighting that to me because, 410, 212s, and then he goes up to 4. Then he's playing a quad again. You know,
when does he play the quad? Is it with Cream?
no. There's photos of him playing the quad when he's when he. I'll find them. There are photos of him playing a quad when he's with John Mayall.
Oh wow, I did not know
live.
that. So it must have been just might have been basically based on the venue. Big venue, bigger amp. Smaller venue, smaller amp.
Okay, so he's playing the JTM 45 head here. This is a famous. Just hold on. Just hold on. Just hold on, because there's a lot of photos here. So here's Clapton. So I'm just going to present myself here. Oh, where's Carl gone? Okay, so I'm pretty sure from my memory, this is Clapton. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Now that looks like a quad, doesn't it?
It looks like a pretty big amp.
Yeah. So that's definitely a head on a cabinet.
Wow. So he's obviously, what's the word? He's obviously experimenting a little bit, and it's the prelude to Cream.
So your headphones, are they in?
Oh, sorry.
Are they in? Did you click? Because I couldn't hear you.
Oh, those other ones didn't work?
No, those are good.
Oh, shivers. Okay. Or maybe these are bust. I was just trying to be cool. Okay.
No. Those ones are phenomenal.
Yeah. Fuck.
Yeah. No. Those are good. They don't pick up any background noise or anything. Those are your Walkman. Sorry, your I'm just showing my age. Walkman. Those are your Apple earphones. Yeah, they're very good. They're outstanding.
Oh, yeah. Have you thought about investing yourself in a wireless AirPod?
Yeah, I've got them. I've got AirPods, and I use that for listening to my music.
Basically, the sound's not different. It's just convenience, is it?
Yeah. The sound's phenomenal. The only reason why I'm using these is because this is my home setup in my studio. You know, that I run my aux box through and my monitor, so it's just easier and convenient for me just to use headphones. But it certainly makes a difference when you're going live having headphones. It just you cut all that background noise out, and it's really good.
Yeah.
So interesting how this information's coming through 50, 60 years later, you know, on something that we thought was really important, and all this little bit of information's coming through.
Well, he went from probably the Roosters with the 15-watt transistor amp to the Yardbirds, a 30-watt Vox amp, to Blues Breakers with the 410 back to the 212, 45-watt back to the 410. He was obviously getting ready for Cream. I think he apologized to John Mayall later on, saying, "I didn't really use you, but you were a stepping stone."
What's wrong with that?
Well, nothing really. I mean,
Yeah.
John might have wanted to get squeezed out another album.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look, I think at the end of the day too, we've all been young. You hang out with some young cats, you have a couple of pints, it was certainly a courageous move for the three of them to get together. They obviously thought that any success that they were going to get was going to be on the reputations that they had as musicians individually. They were certainly reputable musicians. We all know that. But to leave a paying gig where they were getting paid good money by other in other bands, that was one of the reasons why John McVie, for example, refused, to leave and go to Fleetwood Mac, because he was interested in getting that weekly paycheck. It wasn't until he got sacked or got pushed out where okay. So all credit to these young guys for having the courage to say, fuck it, let's go and do it.
Well, I mean, Peter Green starting Fleetwood Mac or Cream starting up, obviously they were talented, but it wasn't going to be guaranteed they'd be selling records, even though that they had the confidence to do that.
Well, you're right, mate. Is there any guarantee that any album with Jack Bruce, Eric Clapton, and Ginger Baker is going to be a great? Is there any guarantee?
Well, it'd be interesting to find out what musicians, whether they're bass players, rhythm players, or drummers, who said no to Eric or Peter Green or to any band and stayed with the conservative paycheck, but then realised 2 years later that was a mistake, because all of a sudden these bands are multi-platinum touring the world, and I'm actually with this band that's kind of disbanded.
Well, what about the lead singer? The original lead singer that was earmarked for Led Zeppelin. I forget his name. We're only talking about him a couple of shows ago. He turned around and he turned Jimmy Page down and said, "Shit, I can't. I'm touring with this band, but check this guy out." And also, and also I think there's another guy too, a bass player who you might be interested in. That was probably the worst decision. See, I can't even remember the name of that guy.
Terry?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah. So probably the worst decision he's ever made.
Now he has to basically just 40 years later just do worn-out interviews talking about what he did wrong.
Yeah, I was the guy that could have been. I could have been. But again, this is something that we used to say and do when we're 13 or 14 years old. Just imagine if Neil Young was in Led Zeppelin, or something like. Would Led Zeppelin have been the monster band with another lead singer?
Yeah, it's crazy. A lot of it's just certain things are just meant to be. And it's right. You can get a couple of really talented guys who just don't gel or mesh, and you get someone that's really talented and someone that's unknown with some raw talent, and all of a sudden they're away. Robert Plant, raw talent. Eric Clapton, raw talent. But
that Robert Plant. I just have to. I've spent the last couple of days just looking through this DVD again, just watching it, and I've mentioned it before here on this show. I've never really been a big Led Zeppelin fan, but I have to tell you that my appreciation for Led Zeppelin is growing every time I hear them, every time I see them. They were just phenomenal. They were just so good, man. And then Rick Beato, who's another famous YouTuber, he does What Makes the Song Great. So he just did one a couple of days ago with Rambling On, and I watched that and I'm going, my gosh, he's just getting it down to the point. One of the reasons why that song is so great is that bass playing that John Paul Jones. They're just phenomenal. They're just monsters, Carl.
And once again, Eric 4 years prior are laying the groundwork with the sound, the humbuckers and the Marshall amps, because Jimmy Page was the Marshall guy, eh?
Yeah. Hey, Great Vanzini.
So that first album a Telecaster through a Marshall or Telecaster through a Fender amp?
A Supro. So what's really interesting, and again, is we never got this information for years because we always had the pictures of Jimmy Page at Earl's Court, with that Marshall stack and that Les Paul, and so we're listening to Led Zeppelin and Led Zeppelin 2, and you're going, wow, that's great, that's awesome, and then a little bit later on in your life, someone tells you, he's I remember arguing with a guy when the guy said to me, I don't know where it was, said he's using a Telecaster on that album. And I remember saying, bullshit, Jimmy Page is using a Les Paul. No, he's using a Telecaster. And it's like, really?
It took me, I couldn't figure it out either. I was like everybody else, doesn't make any sense. Telly's a country twang, thin sounding. This is really raucous, horseish.
And then he's using a Supero amp, which is basically just from what I've read, similar to just a Vox AC15.
Oh really?
Yeah, just like a little amp.
So he must have had his own recording booth, and he must have put himself in a very small room with a microphone.
Well, the good thing about Jimmy Page, though, again, we got to credit this back to John Mayall and Eric Clapton. So when he's recording that I'm Your Witch Doctor and Telephone Blues, so he's hearing that tone when he's recording that, and he wants to replicate that. So he goes and he records Led Zeppelin 1, and he's cranking that amp up. He's cranking it up. He's just going for it. But what's really interesting, though, about the Tallys and the Les Paul, there's another video on that guitar show, and I'll send you the link, where Bob, who's one of the other co-hosts, is making the comparisons between the 59 and 60 Les Pauls sounding very much like Tallys. Some of those early Tallys, too, sounded bright like the Les Paul. So the fact that Jimmy Page is using a Les Paul shouldn't surprise us, with the hindsight of history. The key for him, though, is cranking whatever that amp is, that Supero, up.
Wow. Unbelievable.
So Great Vanzini is in the chat, and he's our American authority. So Supero was the really what really poor kids played through. So it was, so basically it was a piece of shit. Great Vanzini is, that's what we say here in New Zealand when something was just crap. It's a piece of shit.
But also keep in mind, a lot of those black guys, the blues guys, their sound came from a background of not poverty, but that was all they had. So they had a 50-watt amp, and over the course of many years the speakers got torn, but all of a sudden they got this wild sound. So Jimmy Page probably purposely, because he wasn't short of money at that particular stage. I mean, he was living like a prince at a very young age with all that session work.
Oh, definitely. Don't forget, he funded that album. He for what was it?
I did not know that.
Yeah. 45,000. He paid for that album. So and he was frugal. He was the guy that made sure that they weren't spending a lot of money on the right. Yeah, very driven.
He probably purposely would have had a cheap sounding nasty amp, but still with some weight. Maybe the amp didn't have the same marketing backing as other amps, but it had the right sound. I remember being in America, and you've hit
the nail on the head. For Jimmy Page, it was about the sound. It wasn't about the Marshall stack behind him at that stage. It wasn't about that. It was about getting that sound. Yeah.
And what a clever guy coming out the gate on that first album, 1969.
Wow.
Here's 4 horses, just like being wild horses unleashed.
Wow.
I remember a famous quote he said was, "I wanted artistic control of Led Zeppelin in a vice grip," meaning I was the guy putting everything in the vice, and I wound it up or wound it down at my leisure, put it in, took it out.
Well, he was smart enough to know the mistakes that some of his colleagues and cohorts had been making. You know, he was friends with the Rolling Stones. He was friends with the Beatles. He'd seen these guys getting ripped off left, right, and center, you know. And he was a working class guy, and these working class guys use the music business to get out of their situations. So, you know, they're pretty tough. You know, he he may not have been tough as like he's going to knock your block off, but he was pretty tough in making sure that, you know, they were going to look after what they had. You know, he wasn't going to give it away to some con man.
No. No, that's fascinating. We'll have to do a show on that one album. Hey, I unfortunately have to go in about 5 minutes.
No, mate, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to doing a show with you in a couple of days' time. Yeah,
I have to go to I have to get a prescription, and then I've got a 4:30. I'm trying out Zoom for the first time with our work colleagues.
Okay.
Our branch managers had a major heart attack.
Okay, so, well, I'm sorry to hear that. So today is Tuesday. So I'll see you on Thursday. We'll do a show on Thursday. We'll do part 2.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention, I always people always say that Eric Clapton, people said he's going to be different because of Got to Hurry, but did anybody listen to his guitar solo on A Certain Girl? I got a funny feeling they've got those songs mixed up. What do you think of the guitar solo on A Certain Girl? That was Yardbirds.
Oh.
Yeah. So basically it's a B-side. So Got to Hurry is all right. It's just typical 12-bar blues, but I got a funny feeling
you're right.
No one ever talks about his guitar solo on A Certain Girl.
Okay, you've given me some.
Hello.
Rick, I appreciate that. I will.
Hey, thanks, guys. I have to get going. I like I said, I've got to go to the doctor, pick up a prescription, and then come back and do a Zoom thing. Hopefully, have you done Zoom before? You'd have done Zoom today, would you?
Yeah. I had a Zoom meeting today with my boss and my work colleagues talking about what we're going to do. So,
how does Zoom?
Greg Vanzini.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just a piece of
the same.
You just follow it and set it up. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. Just set it up. Sonia, good to see you. Great Vanzini. I think Simon and I are doing a show with you, I think on Sunday, New Zealand time. Carl and I are going to be back here same time, same bat channel in a couple of days' time doing part 2. And then Carl's going to talk a little bit about Led Zeppelin, I think, too, you know, in connection with this album of John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. There's a couple of points that we need to draw out a bit more. I'm going to do some research on the 4x10 amp that he was using before he went into the studio to use the 2x12, which I think is a very interesting point. Sonia, Great Vanzini, and EJ's Guitars, thanks for popping in. And anybody who's going to watch the rerun of this show and has had the patience to go right through, thank you very much for watching Carl and I. We appreciate it. And if there's anything that you want to add to any of the subjects we talk about, Carl and I don't pretend to be experts. So we're open to be told if we've got something wrong, or if you've got something that's really important or some information, you can leave a comment and or jump on a show with us in future. All right?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. So I'm going to let Carl say the last word because I've done a lot of talking on this show.
Oh, hey, no, I just, like Andrew said, we started the show. It's great. We live in a great time where we've gone from one extreme to the next. We've gone from listening to a record to trying to, scour a magazine or find a book at the library to figure out what they're doing or pictures to just like an abundance of information online. So, but it's great that everyone's doing their input as far as Andrew with the picture, or maybe Simon with a comment, or a correction, or maybe myself with some knowledge from a B-side of a song that no one's maybe heard of. But out of one album or one guitar or one humbucker or one note, it's a bit like scripture in the Bible. It's just years and years of information you could extract from that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah,
you can extract from that one album. Interesting. I really appreciate, and in closing with Andrew's contribution, but the contribution from that guy yesterday for the documentary, I thought I knew a lot. I found out I don't know anything, and just all these little things that add up to this groundbreaking album and sound.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. We don't know it all, and like my first introduction into the show, if you guys haven't seen it, there's a point that I'm making about some information that our Facebook group was given. It's if you do get some information and it is groundbreaking, try and acknowledge the person that you gave it. You got it from. It's been respectful. It's Carl told me about this guitar solo, this B-side, and I think it's a key point in the development of Eric Clapton's sound. I want to do a review on some cool YouTube channels out there too that are related to our topic, whether or not people are aware of that, because I think there's a few good cats out there worth checking out. But we can do that later.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for looking forward to the next show. Carl and I enjoy hanging out with each other, talking about the stuff we love, and we're just glad that you guys enjoy being part of it. Stay safe.